Alright, welcome back. Last time we talked about life when viewed in regards to a role-playing game. This time let's talk a little bit about designing your character. Perhaps one of the most fun things about getting into a role-playing game is designing your character. Referring back to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, because it's awesome, we find a character sheet. And laid out here are things such as your strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, all of these stats that we talked about last time, as well as your class, your level, your race, and your alignment, which we will discuss in a future episode. When designing your character in a traditional paper and pencil RPG, normally your stats are determined by rolling dice. For D&D 5th edition, we typically roll 3 six-sided dice to come up with a number somewhere between 3 and 18, with 3 being on the low side, 18 of course on the higher side. And these numeric metrics allow us to determine how easily or how difficult it is for your character to perform certain tasks. In real life, biology tends to roll the dice for us. The genes from our mother and father, as well as our incubation period, lead to the person that we become in childhood. Then, by way of a natural predisposition and the nurturing we receive during our upbringing, we become a fully fleshed out character. While it's easy to tell on a character sheet what our characters may be good or bad at, seldom do we get such a clear overview of our own lives. However, in the realm of psychology, personality inventories do exist, very closely related to a character sheet from Dungeons & Dragons. Inventories such as the Big Five of personality, the Myers-Briggs, and the MMPI are all utilized and have been utilized for many years to help individuals determine strengths and weaknesses they may possess. In-game, we try to focus on our strengths, on our highest stats, all the while downplaying what we consider to be dump stats. Dump stats are characteristics seldom used by our class or by our character. For example, if you have a very big, buff, burly, high-strength character, intent on making his or her way through the world through intimidation and force, intelligence or charisma may end up being that character's dump stat, a statistic seldom used by the character. Likewise, a wizard with very low strength should probably avoid getting into hand-to-hand combat. In-game, we try to find a class or a job that would be germane to our character and their strengths. Likewise, in real life, once we understand our personal strengths and weaknesses, we are better able to seek out employment or livelihood best suited to our personality. So once we have our strengths, once we're aware of them, what do? Ideally, school should be a place of development as opposed to rote memorization. Guidance counselors, skills training, and intellectual opportunities should all be part of a child's curriculum. Unfortunately, all of these require time and effort, as well as resources, and that costs money. College nowadays is almost mandatory to make up for the failings of primary education. Sadly, we go to college to figure out what we want to be, when in reality, that's an issue that should have been clarified during our 13 years of primary education. So realistically, without changing the entire education system, what can be done? To begin with, an honest personal inventory of the self. This can be very difficult for many people, as it requires us to be open and honest about how we view ourselves. Dealing first with our statistics, and using myself as an example, with regard to strength, I'd consider myself maybe around a 13. I'm not a big manly man, but neither am I an invalid. Dexterity is a bit higher for me, as many years of practicing yoga and Tai Chi, as well as working in industries such as food service, where you must be quick and nimble, have allowed me to focus on and increase this statistic. My constitution is about average, so we'll go with a 12 on that one. Intelligence, being our book smarts, I'd put myself around a 15. Sure, I'm pretty smart when it comes to a few different things, but there's a lot more that I could learn. With regards to wisdom, I'd say I'm a pretty zen dude, so let's put me around a 16, due to the years I've spent studying Buddhism and applying different alternative philosophies. Finally, I'd place my charisma maybe around a 15. Being a smaller individual, I've had to learn to use diplomacy over brute strength to avoid most confrontations. And, while overall I'm a pretty likable guy, there are some individuals whom I simply rub the wrong way. And of course, these are just my perceptions of myself. You may view me in a completely different light, with different strengths, different weaknesses, but that is your perception of me, just like I have a perception of you, if I know you. And this is one of the biggest downfalls to self-report inventories. The results are largely left up to the discretion of the individual taking the self-report test. Occasionally we'll find people suffering from delusions regarding their strengths and weaknesses. Perhaps they're down on themselves, giving themselves a 3 in charisma, believing no one likes them and no one cares, they're a horrible person. Or perhaps we view our strength much higher than it should be, landing us into all sorts of trouble. Here we may find real-life issues such as body dysmorphic disorder, things like anorexia and bulimia, where we view ourselves in a contrary way to that of real life. Or perhaps we succumb to megalomania, where we believe our stats to be much higher than what they are. Additionally, we can find the issue of holding too tightly to any persona, any role, any character which we play in real life or in-game. Consider those star athletes in the prime of their career, suffering a career-ending injury. They've spent so much time and energy cultivating this persona that once it's gone, often they are unsure of how to react, how to proceed in life. The same can be said for any of us who holds a job which we identify very strongly with. Once we begin to see our job as our personal identity rather than a job which we fill, we run the danger of suffering greatly should we lose such a job. Even if our identity is only that of a parent, of a caregiver, once our services are no longer needed, if we have held too tightly to this role, we may be left feeling an existentialist vacuum, as do parents when children move out onto their own, and the parents are left with what's called empty nest syndrome. So how do we cultivate a persona without letting it overtake us? Remembering words from the movie Fight Club. You are not your khaki pants. You aren't your title, you aren't your clothes or your car. You're not the things that you own. You are multifaceted, and at each turn you are offered the opportunity to learn more about yourself, cultivate that which works, and let go of that which doesn't. There is no singular, right way to live your life. What we like is considered good. What we don't like we consider bad. And these stem from biological and learned imperatives that we have gained over the years from our culture. Are we part of the group, or are we an outcast? Our stories didn't start with us. They began with our parents, and even before that, our grandparents, and their grandparents, and so on, through the beginning of time. Our stories have been in development for centuries, and now we are the active participants.